I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. Our next guest, bit of a regular, and just so, if for people who don't know this, the power elites tried to bankrupt her, tried to jail her, tried to kill her. She was a former assistant housing secretary in the Bush 41 administration. She tried to stop the fraud. Woo, they got pissed. And I'm talking about Catherine Austin Fitts of Solari.com, also of the Solari Report, and this is her latest edition out. As I said before, it's really done nice. Lots of information. This is just part of the media empire that is the Solari Report and Solari.com. It's a glossy, magazine type of, almost, college level people who want to be in the know about what's going on, investing, geopolitical, that kind of stuff. Let me bring her on. Catherine Austin Fitts, thank you for joining us today from Tennessee.
Greg, and thank you so much for that introduction, because I always love reading the comments on USA Watchdog whenever I do an interview, and everybody said, she's such an establishment hack.
Well, I know that's why I wanted to put it on there. People don't realize how much you put your ass on the line for trying to stop fraud and doing for the good of America, and now you're still trying to do well. You have to make a living, of course. You have Solari.com, your website, the Solari Report, and I just want to, this is the first quarter that you sent to me here, and I just wanted to. It says where to stash cash in 2016. Of course, I noticed there's gold there. I'm sure silver too. But I wanted to talk about Donald Trump. You have this in your first quarter. You, as assistant housing secretary, you handle hundreds of billions of dollars. You've managed tens of billions of dollars. You've managed $300-400 billion total gross. You consult to people all around the world. And Trump has come out recently and said, we don't have to default in the debt by printing money. And even David Stockman, former White House budget director, has come out and said, Donald Trump wants to cut the debt. He's telling the truth that we're never going to pay this back in anything resembling today's value of the dollar. What do you think about Donald Trump's plan of cutting the debt by making bondholders of Treasury bonds take a hit?
Well, actually, that's not what he said. What he said, because he was talking about open market purchase. He was talking about doing a swap. So he's saying where debt is trading for a discount and you can swap. He's basically talking about re-engineering, but it's nothing that would default or be involuntary to a creditor. He's talking about where you can refund fees or make open market swaps and purchases. In fact, Donald Trump is exactly the person to figure out, because what we need is not a debt swap. We need a debt for equity swap. The whole planet needs a debt for equity swap. So rather than re-engineer the debt, what we need to do is re-engineer the relationship between debt and equity and go to a much more equity-based system.
Well, he caught some grief from the power elites. They calling him crazy and reckless. And is that crazy and reckless what he wants to do? In your opinion, you've handled big money.
What he's talking about is the truth. In other words, we are in no risk of default because we can print money. If you could print, if you could denominate all the money you borrowed for your house or your credit card in currency that you could print off your printer, there's no risk of default. The risk, of course, is debasement, as David Stockman was saying, is that the value of the currency diminishes. And in fact, over the last 100+ years, the value of the currency has diminished by about 98 to 99%, and it's that steady inflation that's really harvesting sort of the average person, and many of them don't realize it. But what the other thing is, you have to understand what we've been doing now for decades as globalization has occurred, is we're printing money and then trading it around the world for real assets. So we print money off of our computer and then use it to buy up new companies that are securitizing all around the world. It's the global sweepstakes. Remember the TV show where they give everybody a cart and the guy who puts the most in his cart over 5 minutes gets wins the game? Well, that's what we've been doing, and actually it's fantastically economic. If I can print money off computer and run around my neighborhood and buy up all the real estate, why wouldn't you do that?
Well, Trump, also you have a story about Trump you were going to tell me, and I said, save it for the interview. So tell me your Trump story. You've actually met him, I take it. I like the guy. I mean, he's brash. He says crazy stuff.
When I was in New York, the communications firm that Dylan Reed used also did Trump. And so I would call in and everybody would have a headache because Trump just screamed at That's my only association with Trump. But what Trump was, there was this Trump spokesman right after Indiana on Fox News, and the Trump spokesman, the Fox News moderator said, "How are you guys ever going to beat Hillary Clinton?" And the Trump spokesperson said, "Well, Hillary Clinton has never been vetted." And the Fox person was shocked, and they said, "What do you mean she's never been vetted? She's totally vetted. She was First Lady, she was Senator, she was Secretary of the State. Of course she's vetted." And the Trump spokesperson said, "No, she's never been vetted." And the Fox person, who was really shocked, said, "Well, give me an example." And so the Trump person started with Benghazi. Now, if they'd let her keep going, she would have gone through 20, Benghazi, Mena, Arkansas, the email, Clinton racketeering with money not getting through with Haiti. There are 20 plus things. So here's the question, Greg. Will Trump really vet Clinton publicly? Because there's an official reality and then there's a reality. And that reality has never made it into mainstream press. And frankly, Donald Trump can get it into mainstream press. He doesn't need mainstream press. He can just get on his Twitter feed.
Did you ever see Roy? Did you ever see Roy Jones fight? The middleweight, or I think he's a middleweight. Roy Jones from Florida. He would hit people from all. Instead of doing, he'd be boom, 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 boom. He hits you from every angle. He's very entertaining to watch. I think this is Trump to Hillary Clinton. He's going to hit her from every. He's going to hit her from. You did a terrible job as Secretary of State. Look at Libya. Look at Syria. Look at the carnage. Look at Afghanistan, Iraq. Look at your Secretary of State. He's going to hit her from every angle. Go ahead.
There are two things to understand about what's going on. First of all, I had dealings when I was in Washington with the Black Manafort Stone crowd, who are basically helping Trump. So you've got Stone and you've got Manafort. Now, if you want to talk about two guys who know how to throw mud effectively in the national campaign arena, there are no two better dirty players than those two guys that I know of. I mean, they can out-Rove Karl Rove. Okay, so if everybody's going to take the gloves off, you've got the best of the best to do that. And I can tell you my stories on the run-ins with them. But it's going to get quite mean and vicious if they won, if they decide that's what's effective. Okay?
Manafort looks so handsome, so so perfectly appointed, and then you're telling me he's like, he's a mud hen. He's going to get into it.
Well, if you want to have a really dirty fight,
yeah,
those guys know how to fight hard and dirty.
Well,
okay?
Trump knows it's going to be dirty.
But here's the thing: Clinton's never had to answer for any of the real deal issues and the dirt on the Clintons. Now, here's what's interesting. So one of the reasons the Clintons never had to answer is so much of it was done with the Bushes and the Republican establishment. So they were really partners in many of the things they did. But we've seen, remember, Roger Stone came out before the campaign with a book on the Clintons and a book on the Bushes. Sort of a compendium of all the real deal dirt. So that's in the body politic, if you will. But the second thing is that we see George H.W. Bush, W. Bush, and Jeb Bush all come out and say they're not going to back Trump. Now, that means that Trump is free to throw the mud, that it'll hit the Clintons, but it'll splatter all over the Bushes, but now he's free to go.
And you were in the 41 Bush administration, the H.W. Bush administration, and this is the fraud goes back deep and long and all that. So, but you think that Trump has he's got the team to have a fighting chance. The pundits who have all been wrong about this whole deal. Incidentally, the press coverage of Trump is so lopsided. So I cover it every week on USA Watchdog, and I'm not even a Trump supporter. People, you're a Trump supporter. No, I'm a truth supporter. And it's awful what they do.
So,
they gave him $2 billion in media. Awful. $1.5 billion of that was awful.
Right. It really comes down, Greg, to where the military and the intelligence agencies stand on this. So if he can get enough support in the military and the intelligence agencies, I think Trump can win.
He's talking about rebuilding the military, and the equip after that is the cheapest thing we could do. And that's hard not for the military to like. They're like, yeah.
Well, the police this morning was within the military. he's ahead 2-1 on polls of the military. Was one I saw this morning. Now who knows? It's just one poll, but we're way too far out to predict who's going to win. I think the establishment globally clearly assumes Hillary Clinton's going to win. Many people assume that Trump's been put in there to make it not feasible for people to vote for the Republican candidate. But I disagree. I think it really, if he gets enough support from the military and the intelligence agencies, Trump can win.
I think he's going to get support from Democrats. That's what's freaking out the Republicans. He's going to look at the Northeast. He can put the Northeast in play. Look at Ted Cruz. There's your conservative, and I like Ted Cruz. I don't want to throw dirt on him, but I mean that's their nightmare. He's going to get union people to say, yeah, you're shipping my job overseas. Yeah, you're killing the coal industry. Yeah.
So I want to come back not to Trump versus Clinton, but I want to come back to what's going to happen with transparency during this campaign. Because if you look at how Ted Cruz dropped. Ted Cruz says he was going to fight all the way to the convention. And then two things come out from the Trump side that are very dirty poker. The attack on his father and the attack on the hint of extramarital affairs. And suddenly Cruz's dropped ba-boom like this, and Kasich drops ba-boom like that.
Well, he also won Indiana by a pretty wide margin after they said that it was the last stand. So
it could have been that. But look at Chris Christie's face when he came out and endorsed Trump. That was a man who just gotten beat up. I don't know what they used on him, but it was tough. So, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Prince of Egypt, but there's a great song in it where Moses defies Pharaoh, and suddenly you get a song called "You're Playing with the Big Boys Now." The Clintons have never had to face someone who could access national and global media and air the real dirty laundry, not just of the Clintons, but the whole American establishment. And if Trump gets enough support from the military and the intelligence, he can do that. And if he does that, Craig, we're in for a whole new round of transparency that we've never seen in this country before.
Are we better off? I mean, listen, Trump's going to have to cut deals. I mean, I know that. It's not a perfect world. He's not going to come in and be George Washington. I mean, he's going to have to cut deals. But are we going to have less tyranny? I mean, that's really what we're talking about, levels of tyranny. Are we going to have less tyranny with Trump than Clinton?
We're talking about somebody who's a known quantity versus someone who's a wild card. And I've always been uncomfortable with Trump because my attitude is the presidency of the United States is not an entry-level position. So he's going to have to get people who really understand the machinery and the bureaucracy and know how to work it. If he doesn't, he's going to get to town and he's going to get a passive-aggressive response, and we're going to be in real trouble, including globally.
Well,
so he's going
to
have to make deals, and he's going to have to get the right people. But as I said on the last show we did, some hope is better than no hope. With Clinton, it's exactly what Peggy Noonan said. She's my favorite editorial writer. She said, we now have a choice between a crazy man and a criminal. I, for one, would much prefer a crazy man because one of Trump's great strengths is he can see the important big picture.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's and the thing you have to understand about Trump is, crazy as he sounds, his buildings stand. His buildings don't fall down.
Yeah, he actually did build something, and he did build it. The president wants to say, "You got lucky." That's the latest thing he's saying. You got lucky. What do you make of all this stuff with Obama at the White House press dinner? This could be the last White House press dinner, and I don't have this exact quote, but I think he said, "The end of the republic never looked so good." Is he just joking? When the media laughed at that, and I'm thinking, what is funny about that?
Well, it's not funny. It's something a president shouldn't say. What I would say is that, when you are the president, you are held accountable for all sorts of things you don't have the power to deliver. It's a very frustrating position. He's in an enormous number of double binds, and I would say he's reached a level of frustration where he is no longer acting presidential. Now, he got himself into this in the first place. What?
You're talking about Obama.
Yeah.
And do you think he can have there's this thing on the internet, and I know you're really a big thinker and you're connected, that he's going to institute martial law, and I have other people saying, yeah, the rank and file not going to go with that. The martial law is really run by the military, not by the president. He's going to institute martial law, that the economy could implode, and it could. I mean, Josh Earnest was out saying that Saudi Arabia sold their $750 billion that could implode the system.
Right. The deep state is in control, not Obama. Obama doesn't have the power to do that. If he does it, it's because the deep state orders him to do it. There's no way Obama has the power to just implement that.
So, are they going to have to just live with Trump? I mean, could Trump end up being somebody that, well, he may get elected, and we'll cut our best deal possible with him, as opposed to Hillary, who still might get indicted by the FBI. She's got to talk to the FBI soon.
Here's the question: where does Trump's strength come from? Because Trump's being allowed to do this. He's going to have, if he's got Manafort and he's got Stone, and he's got the networks that allow him to continue to be successful in the media. He's got support within the intelligence community and the military. If that support was not there, he wouldn't be where he is today. So the question, where is that support coming from? And what is it they want Trump to do? And it could literally just be that they want Hillary Clinton to win. So they've used Trump to white out the Republicans. So it depends on where it goes from here. And I think it's way too early to tell. The other thing is the American people haven't heard Trump talk about what he's going to do. I mean, part of Trump's problem is he's got to learn to talk more about what he's going to do as opposed to whether he's winning or losing the campaign. You're not going to believe it, when I was in Pennsylvania 2 weeks ago, he spoke in Westchester. I got there and my cousin said, "You want to go to a Trump rally?" So we got tickets and we went. And if you look at the percentage he was talking about, he's a very competitive guy. I'm beating this guy and this guy and this guy in inside baseball versus, the crowd wanted to hear about, okay, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? And what should we all be doing to make sure that when you're president, we, how do we make America great again? That's what they want to hear about. So he's going to have to talk more about that and less about, he's going to have to throw plenty of dirt at Clinton, but that's not enough.
Now, we talked the last time, and you were more pessimistic than in past about the possibility of collapse. You said that, it's in it. They could, if they manage it right, they can take it into 2017. But if they don't, they can implode it. And here we have Saudi Arabia threatening to sell our bonds on the front cover of your report. And correct me if I'm wrong, I've never seen gold on the front cover of your report. We've had big investment people. Druckenmiller, I think, did a big thing about pulling all this demand forward. And at the end of the day, he's got a big hedge fund manager. He's going to go with gold. So where would you stash cash in 2016? Let's start with gold. Would you put gold? Would you put cash there?
Well, here's what's happening. We have grown the economy globally with debt for now decades. And part of that is interest rates have come down, and that's over, Greg. That, it's a huge aircraft turning. And the problem is it's a game of musical chairs. Everybody's looking at that turn. The bond market's much bigger than the equity market. Where's all this money going to go, and how do they protect it? And as it's turning, we're watching the ECB in Japan continue to sort of pump that monetary pump by going to negative interest rates. So people are looking and saying, okay, well, where do I put my cash that's safe from the game of musical chairs if we get liquidity hiccups? Because I think the problem is not it's all going to collapse. We're going to get liquidity hiccups, chairs are going to get pulled, and some people are going to lose. Some people are going to win. So how do we make this huge turn, and how do we protect ourselves from the credit defaults and the liquidity, but then how do we make sure our money is available? Okay.
And let's stop for a minute, because people are listening to this going, okay, chairs going to be pulled. What chairs? People who hold Puerto Rican debt, those chairs are going to be pulled? Who's going to be a loser?
So people who have borrowed money in currencies that they can't print, Puerto Rico being one. They use the dollar. They can't print their own currency. They borrowed way more than they can pay back, that they have the economic base. Same with Detroit. So you're going to have all these creditors globally, both countries, municipalities, and companies, who can't pay back a debt that's denominated in a different currency when their revenues are going down.
Pensions.
So we've seen
pensions are going to get killed. Pensions are the same thing.
Some pensions are going to get killed. Some insurance companies are going to get killed because, remember, their model depends on a certain rate of interest, and they're not getting it. Remember, in 1990, we could get 8% risk-free in a bank deposit. Now we're getting 0.
Yeah.
So imagine if you're a pension fund or insurance company, and the yield on your portfolio is going down, down, down. Your actuarial requirements are 7%. But, yields are going down 2, 1, 0, and as you roll over, you can't get anywhere near that 7%. So your business model is is really up in the air. It's not working. Okay? And so the question is, what do you do? And so you have all these changes that have to be made. And what you and I have talked about in anticipation of these changes, the leadership in America and Europe basically pulled money out of the old systems and moved it into a new system. That's what I think the bailouts were, grossly oversimplified. They pulled, in my estimation, at least 40 trillion out of the old systems and moved it over. And that included the pension funds and insurance companies. And now you see why.
And now what we're seeing is the people they didn't realize the money was pulled out are now realizing, oh my gosh, the money's not there. And these are the people that are waking up to the fact that they've been robbed, and the bank robbers in the truck are long gone.
Right, long gone. The problem is worse. They helped the robbers. Right. If you look, if you go into any neighborhood in America and you look at the housing industry in that neighborhood, they helped. So now the biggest question in all of this is not the pension funds and the insurance companies, it's the U.S. government. Because the U.S. government, the liabilities have gone up, 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 while the assets have been moved out, out, out. And now the question is, with the liabilities coming due and the assets, vastly diminished, the only way you can deal with the problem is to print paper. And that's why
Go ahead.
That's why the conversation between Trump and Stockman is so interesting. Okay? Because what they're debating is, so the truck took off with a lot of the assets over here. They're all sitting here, in corporations and private investors and tax havens. We've got the liabilities for everybody. And now the only way we can solve it is to print paper. We've got the creditors, we've got the military, and we've got the retirees and the social safety net. Who's going to get squeezed and how?
Not the
That's
military.
The question. Right. And the reason is, to keep the game going around the dollar, you have to have the military.
That's right.
So that's why Trump is saying number one is the military, because without the military, game ends.
The cheapest thing we can do. That's what he said. The cheapest thing we can do, build the military up.
That's absolutely right.
That's
the cheapest thing. Right.
And to somebody like Clinton or somebody like these far left supporters, they think that their nirvana can continue, just by wishful thinking. And Trump is pragmatic. He might be the turnaround artist. He might be the guy that that makes some big changes and causes a lot of pain. That's going to happen anyway.
I don't think Clinton thinks that. I mean, I think Clinton is prepared to go to war and be a warmonger to keep the game going. So I think Clinton is prepared to use force, both covert and overt, to do that. I think that the problem is the way Clinton's going to go about it is she and her pals are going to racketeer something fierce.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be, you have a terrible alienation going on that is very much threatening the productivity of the whole system. And so I think, I think Clinton's willing to be the warmonger. I just don't think that Clinton necessarily commands the respect of the machinery you have to do to implement it. You have to have the respect of the military. You have to have the respect of the intelligence agencies. But at this point, Greg, you can't run the country with no respect, bottom up. And I tell you, in the heartland, there is no respect for Hillary Clinton in many, many places. Now, in Hillary Clinton's defense as a politician, I think what the leadership wants, who are supporting, because you have a lot of billionaires supporting Hillary Clinton, is they look around the world and they say, if we can get the women vote globally and the women consumption and entrepreneur and business vote globally, women GNP plus America GNP beats China and Asia. So if you're looking to be dominant globally, you're using the soft revolution to do it. Facebook and the Arab Spring kind of situations and Soros's, manipulations. If you're using soft revolution, then you want to play the women's card. You played the African American card. That was very successful. You made a fortune. You got the bailouts done. Now you want to play the women's card globally and have a warmonger, but with a fluffy picture.
Do you think we still could have in your? I'm only skimming the surface, folks. So you should get on Solari.com and look into the Solari report, being a subscriber. And incidentally, just so you know, I don't get paid anything for this. I just have Catherine Austin Fitz on because I like her. I think she's smart. You should listen to her the last 25 minutes. She's smart. But anyway, back to you. You're talking here about that the thing that could upset the apple cart is fraud and war. And that's what you've been worried about in terms of, you were more worried the last time we were on about a financial calamity and than I've ever heard you. Are you still worried about that? Has that subsided?
That's what I'm worried about, because there's the system and then there's the individual. And one of the ways the system survives is by composting individuals. So I'm not worried about the system surviving. I'm worried about my subscribers not getting composted. Okay? So the whole point of doing this is I was getting a lot of questions, Greg, about cash and cash management. And what I discovered was that people were making a lot of mistakes that they don't need to make. We're so used to having the government keep the system going that we don't know how to sit down and make sure that our custodian, on fundamental economics is solid. Not because they have government guarantees, but because they have good leadership, good management, they have good capitalization, they run the business right. Okay? So, I happen to believe that the end of the world, the apocalypse could come and my bank would still be going. It's what I believe. Because it's got such a great fundamental business, but it's hugely overcapitalized. So I want people to start looking at where their money is and what it's doing in terms of the fundamental economics, and stop thinking, we can just depend on the system to fix it. Because as chairs get pulled in musical chairs, we might not be able to. And so I wanted to walk through the issues of how you as an individual figure out, okay, what do I need cash for? Because you have cash for different things. Some's for liquidity, some for transactions, some for his investment, and some is just, a core position safety. And then you need to have it in different kinds of places for different purposes. And there are an awful lot of options. And of course, one of them is always paying off your debt. In other words, one way to keep your finances right now is to permanently lower your overhead as much as possible. The more you lower your overhead, the less operating leverage you have, and the less debt you have, the less financial leverage you have. So lower your leverage, and that means if inflation takes off, you're protected. If deflation takes off and we get a lot of defaults and implosion in the system, you're also protected. So the more you can reposition yourself, all of our balance sheets have been intermediated as we do more and more financialization. Now, you can disintermediate. I give a whole series of examples in the report. So it's basically a tool. The other thing is, the thing that scared me the most was I was getting subscribers coming to me and saying, bail-ins are coming, the banking system is not safe, I'm going to take all my money out of the bank and put it into Bitcoin.
Oh.
And I would say, no.
I'm not a fan of Bitcoin. Not a fan of it.
Well, in digital
computer program. Go ahead.
Right. So digital systems do not have integrity right now. I mean, do you think digital systems in America have integrity?
Well, no. I mean, Ted Koppel did a whole thing about it. The whole thing could brown out and black out. Ted Koppel, a few months ago, wrote a book about it, I think.
So part of this was to really address, sort of how to think about cash management, how you make sure your cash is safe, how you make sure you're diversified, and why you don't bet the ranch on any magic bullet, including purely digitally based systems. And that's the beauty of gold. Gold you can put in your pocket and walk away. Now, the biggest losses that my clients and subscribers have had on gold is they put them in their house, they forget where they put it, or the plumber walks off with it, or they die and the heirs don't know where it is. So there are many different issues of making sure all these different pots are secure. And that's what we tried to do, is go through them, because I was tired of explaining it time and time again. I said, okay, we're going to write this all out and give it to somebody so they can really understand and work through it themselves.
And I wanted to get into the fraud thing. Go ahead. You want to say something? I cut you off.
Fraud is a major problem.
And as a money manager, as somebody who tells people how to manage their money, I mean, I'm looking at, we just had Deutsche Bank admit, we rigged the gold market and the silver market. Primary dealer of treasuries, along with Bank of Nova Scotia and HSBC. Also primary dealers because they sell treasuries and gold makes them look bad. Right. I'm sure those aren't the only primary dealers involved in this total scam, but you do end up with the metal. And also a LIBOR scam, rigged. London Interbank offered rate, $800 billion, or I don't know, trillions of dollars in interest rates around the world, set off LIBOR. Forex rigged, they admitted it, paid fines, rigged. J.P. Morgan, for goodness sakes, helped Bernie Madoff in his scam. I mean, how do you dodge the frauds?
Right. I just interviewed on the Salary Report. It's going to be on in 2 weeks. Helen Chapin is the lead attorney for the Madoff victims and was a Madoff victim herself. Very successful attorney, very brilliant attorney. And she's written a book called J.P. Madoff. And we walked through the fraud, Greg. The reality is Morgan was the senior partner in that fraud. J.P. Madoff couldn't. The investment advisory at J.P. Madoff had one bank account. Everything went through that bank account from 1960 on. J.P. Morgan saw everything, including the fact that there were no securities. I asked her who was the securities custodian. She said there was none because there were no securities. J.P. Morgan knew everything. Okay, so they were essentially the controlled position in that relationship. So now, but one of the things she says in J.P. Madoff is 50% of Americans do business with J.P. Morgan. Credit cards, checking accounts. Why does anyone in their right mind do business with J.P. Morgan? See, that's the number one question is who's your custodian? If you put money with someone who has a pattern of fraud historically, you're toast.
Yeah, go ahead.
J.P. Morgan Chase's business model depends on fraud. It is financially dependent on fraud, which is a whole other conversation. But why would you, one of the things I do is I tell people, look, there's proprietary trading, derivatives, and fraud, and all this other stuff. Choose custodians who don't have those conflict of interests. Because what we saw in MF Global was, when nitty gets the gritty and push gets the shove, they suck the money out of the retail to protect the proprietary trading or the institutionals or the institutional credit. So J.P. Morgan Chase got the money out, and the money got sucked out of retail and MF Global. So don't do business with people you can't trust. In other words, you need to look, what is the governance structure, what is the management, and what are their businesses, and is their number one business taking care of people like me?
J.P. Morgan, go ahead.
Right. So if you're banking and using as a custodian any of these companies, you need to understand you're taking very significant risk because you're low man on the totem pole and they have massive conflicts. And, and they have a pattern of fraud and defrauding people like you, and you have no representation or enforcement that's going to protect you. So you just to be aware of that. The second thing you need to be aware of, Greg, is in a digital age, data about money is worth more than money, and there is no privacy. Okay? So if you're getting on Facebook and going yakety, yakety, yak, that data is being swept up, integrated with the data that's being swept up from all the other places, and is being used to harvest you. Okay? So you need to know, one, there's no privacy. So, when I'll have somebody call me and say, oh, well, I bought these points from a dealer, and I'm just going to go sell them back, and I'm not going to report them on the taxes. I'm like, honey, they've got a control file on you now. Do you really want to do that? So that's the second thing you have to understand. The third thing is a lot of the fraud occurs around debt arrangements or just harvesting. So if you can get out of debt, or if you use debt, be very, very careful. Read all the documentation, know what you're getting into, get out as soon as you can. Just be very, very careful. We used to have multiple redundancies on my mortgage because the mortgage services would play all sorts of games and try and triple default me. And it was like war for years. Now, it had something to do with the litigation, I suspect. But anyway, so it doesn't necessarily happen to everybody. But you have to be very careful with who you do debt deals. And I will see people who will literally do a mortgage with their local community bank because they don't want the risk of putting it into a securitized pool and ending up with all that potential for fraud. Okay? So that's another thing. Another thing you need to understand is I have one of my best Salary reports is a Salary report on entrainment technology and subliminal programming. And increasingly, Greg, what you're seeing is investments marketed using entrainment technology and subliminal programming, either on the internet or in analyst presentations. I suspect that's probably what happened in the Enron analyst presentations, or on the telephone. So I'll have a situation where somebody call me up and say, I want to make this investment, and I'll look at it. It's a private placement. It's been marketed to them by the phone. And I'll say, you have a 100% chance of losing all your money. And it's sold, it's good for the planet. It's helping people. It's very fluffy. It's got that Clinton Foundation fluffy thing. And what I realized in talking with them, is that literally entrainment has been used on the phone to help market this. And they don't realize that such technology exists. And the reason I did the Soleri report is to help people understand this technology exists. So if something is resonating very powerfully in a wonderful way, that's great, but never make an investment based on emotion. Make it on mathematics. Sit down, look at the numbers, look at the facts, and make sure that what you're doing makes mathematical sense. That's the beauty of money, is that you can bring it down to math. That's why one of the things I like about Trump is he can count. He's one of the few people running for a major office in this country who not only can count, but can talk about it.
Well, Barack Obama had, 2 years as a senator, before that some communist community organizer in Chicago. I mean, he didn't have any experience. But Barack Obama, I mean, I'll take Trump's experience over his any day. I want to move on here. I want to go on. Okay. The war card. Okay, so fraud, the good thing about gold is you can hold it, it's yours. You can take yourself out of the system. I guess that's your point about gold, correct?
Right. Always have enough gold to bribe the border guards. That's what I say.
Okay. All right. So gold's a good investment, along with a big portfolio. Pay down your debt, get your car title, get your house title, pay off your credit cards.
On gold, right now, gold is very volatile. Now, it's volatile up this year, but we could still run another big down if we get into a deflation. So I have a great commentary on the website called "What Percentage of My Assets Should I Hold in Precious Metals?" And I talk about having a core position and investment position. The core position is the money you have to bribe the border guards. And that's central bank insurance. You don't care what the price is, but you need to make sure for your core position, you're not worried about the price. So if it goes down to 700, you're not worried. If it flies up to 2,000, you don't get excited and sell it. It's your core position. You want ounces of gold or silver, and you don't think about it the way you think of an investment position.
That's very good. Very good advice. It's not a trade. It's not a trade, core.
It's not a trade.
And I want to get into the war thing. And I have to say, there was a time that we came on, and I was kind of mean to you, and I'm sorry about that, about the Iran deal. And I said there would be no deal. And with no signatures, there's no deal. There is no deal. Kerry spent most of his time at the State Department doing a deal to curtail Iran's military nuclear program. When asked about it in Congress, Kerry said, I didn't do that. The UN does that. He's an idiot. There's no deal. There's no deal. There are no signatures. There's no paperwork. Nothing's been released to the public. There's no deal. And things in the Middle East, as I predicted, would get worse. And they are.
Right. So I don't mean to be irritating, but I'm a big fan of John Kerry.
I'm sorry, he's a criminal. He lied. He did 4 years of looking into Iran's nuclear deal, and then says he doesn't understand about the UN is going to do the inspections. He doesn't understand that. You're an idiot. You're an idiot, Mr. Kerry. You're an idiot.
But this is a question why.
Wait, let me flush that out. Now we have Ben Rhodes, who's on saying that they spoofed and basically controlled the press into putting out a narrative in an echo chamber, and that to me smacks of a total sham fraud deal. That's what the Iran deal is and continues to be, and not a single word on a document has been revealed. And even the Obama administration, the Kerry State Department, admits there's no signatures. It's a scam and a fraud.
Right.
Period.
So why?
The end.
So why?
Yeah. Why would they lie to me like that? Why would they lie to America? And Ben Rhodes comes out just like, what's his name, at MIT for the Obama administration, and so proud of the lies. So proud of spoofing, the press and controlling the press in an echo chamber. Why? So the question is, why the big fat lie? I got to say, I'm going to take a victory lap. I was right. There's no deal. You don't give somebody $100 billion and no signatures. Would you do a deal where you gave somebody $100 billion with no signatures? Yeah, there's no deal.
So if I don't know, what I don't here's my guess. This is just a guess. I think they needed to do a pivot to Asia. I think the biggest threat right now to U.S. hegemony is in the South China Sea and in Asia. I think they wanted to pivot to Asia, and they needed to get out of the Middle East. They needed to move the Middle East down in the priority scale, and they were going to do whatever they had to do, and if they couldn't get a deal, they were going to make it look like a deal. because I think they want to. I think they want to let the Middle East stew in their own juices. The U.S. expects to be energy self-sufficient within the next 5 years.
And there's news right now, which backs up your premise. China has got all these islands. They have scrambled fighter jets. The U.S. has their ships in the South China Sea. They're being challenged by the U.S. That would play in with your thesis, your hunch that, we're worried about Asia. We're worried about China is what we're worried about.
Right. So if you look at our status as a unipolar empire or power, our status has come for many years by having the only global satellite system. But then Russia got theirs up, and this year Europe is getting theirs up. And of course, China's trying to build theirs out, and China's trying to build their currency out. Now, as long as we have hegemony globally of the sea lanes and the satellites, we're in a very unique position. And the dollar market share is held surprisingly well, given what's going on. But if they start to get hegemony in the South China Sea and move it out throughout Asia, that really puts us in question, particularly the more they internationalize their currency. So, we're in a big direct power struggle now. Are we going to go to a multipolar world? If yes, how? Or are we going to stay a unipolar power? And right now, what you're going to see, particularly in the leadership, is they're going to do everything they can to maintain that unipolar power, so that if we do go multipolar, they're in as powerful a position as possible. And that's why I think they're trying to play the women's card. Because remember, Fred, change your paradigm. With cell phones, you can market one person at a time globally. So if you can build a brand, if you can put in a woman who's quietly a warmonger, but is doing the fluffy thing, and you can get women globally to be for you, that puts you in a very powerful position. But you've got to make sure you protect the sea lane hegemony. Make sense?
Do you think? Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that they got the problem with their woman is that she's a terrible woman and she's under an FBI investigation for obvious, breaking of the Espionage Act by having a private server. And she had a private server, in my opinion, so she could cover up doing scam deals and selling out her office at Secretary.
They were racketeering globally. And it's very clever. I don't know if you've interviewed the guy who wrote Clinton Cash.
No, I haven't. I want to do that.
Yeah, it's very serious investigative reporting and lays it all out. And it's racketeering on a global scale. And that's part of the problem. If you look at what the machinery has to do to make the dollar system go, you need the intelligence agencies. You need the military. You cannot afford to offend them. And so why they're so bullish on Clinton, I don't know. If I were them 5 years ago, I would have started grooming. If they want to do the fluffy thing, they needed a different woman, because her negatives are so huge.
Yeah.
And if Trump brings it all out, it's not going to be about Trump versus Clinton. It's really going to be the American establishment put on trial. Because it's not about Clinton, it's about the whole model.
So do we think we get war with China? I mean, Warren Pollack, very smart guy, who I'm going to have on again. He's working something up for me, but he worked something up for himself, actually, not for me. He talked about, a year and a half ago, hey, the big problem is China. And it's not really the Middle East, it's China. And could we have war with China? I mean, could we try to shoot first while we still have an advantage instead of letting them build out their deal? I mean, I hate to say that, but...
The relation, we are very interdependent with China. So it's like two Siamese twins, punching and kissing each other at the same time. So I don't think we can have, I think war is unlikely because there's too much interdependency. But I think the covert wars, whether the cyber hacking and cybersecurity or the, sort of the covert struggles, are going to be mammoth. And they're going to go on. The economic warfare back and forth is going to go on. So I think probably one of the reasons for the volatility in the Chinese stock market has been covert warfare.
And my last question: dollar going lower from here? I mean, nobody is Drunken Miller, all these other people that manage money along with you. Money managers that I've heard saying they're not happy about the dollar. They think the dollar is going to go much lower. What do you think about the dollar?
Here's the problem with this situation, and it's mind-boggling. When you run an economy on a managed basis and get this far away from a market economy, the problem is the primary trend in the dollar, bonds, stocks, and gold is in question. So every primary trend you're dealing with is totally in question and could go either way. And a lot of it is because you've got a politically managed system and not a market economy. And as the more you politically manage it, the lower the productivity goes. So, it is really a house of cards, and the money managers are looking at this, and they're very nervous for good reason, because, a politically managed system is not as robust and healthy as one that's managed by market economics.
And they're worried about it. They're worried about it. They're buying gold. They're worried about collapse. Correct?
They're worried about real liquidity freezes and an inability for the political system to govern it properly and manage it. I mean, here's the reality. We know what we have to do. We're all afraid. One of the reasons Trump is resonating is he's not afraid to deal with it. He's like, I want to deal with it. Okay? So now, I don't think he's necessarily looked under the cover and seen everything he's going to see. If he gets to the Oval Office, I think he's going to come out a lot more. He's going to look a lot more sober the next day. So, but you have a failure of the political system to be able to face and manage and deal with what's going on. And one of the primary reasons that's so, Greg, is we've managed this situation for, ever since World War II by keeping more and more and more and more secret. The other day, George H.W. Bush was quoted as saying, the truth, the American people can't handle the truth. Well, I think the American people can handle the truth, and I think one of the reasons I'm encouraged by what Trump's doing is he's going to start bringing a little bit more out. And that's what we need. The only way we get out of this, we are being killed by a politically managed system that is being driven by more and more privilege and more secrecy. So we got to go to transparency, and it's going to be a very painful process for the American people. It's not going to be pretty.
Which is why you're telling people to don't do business with people who are fraudsters, because if they implode, the fraud's going to take the money and say sue us and things like that. And that's why you're telling people buy gold, pay off your house, get your house title, get your car title. Be robust, be strong. Is what you're telling people.
Right. It's all old-timey information. It's all the rules of the trade that have been followed by the wealthy families that preserved money for centuries. Good times and bad times. You have to be able to turtle through them both. So anyway, so I really, if you're interested on how to make sure you protect yourself from the game of musical chairs, which is upon us, it's not coming, it's here. It's already here. So Puerto Rico is the perfect example.
And there's going to be a lot of people without seats, as you're saying, that you got to protect yourself. A lot of people are going to get the chair pulled off from underneath them.
Right. And here's the ugly part of this. The ugliest part is the people running the system are smart. And the way they keep the system going is composting individuals. And one of their favorite ways to compost individuals is to scare them to death and then talk them into doing things which are fraudulent or lose their money or help them prototype their new digital currencies.
Catherine Austin Fitts, Solari Report. It's on the website, solari.com. Catherine Austin Fitts. Thank you so much. You got to give me some credit for the Iran deal. Come on, I want to hear you say you were right.
Hey,
I got anyway. I shouldn't.
All right.
Okay. All right. Hey, listen. No kidding though, but folks. Thank you for being on, Catherine Austin Fitts. If you don't realize why I have her on, if you don't listen to this interview, you just get a perspective that my head just explodes. I love it. It's all good information. That's what I love about it. Catherine Austin Fitts, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.